Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. My name is Dana Thomas. I've worked in our education community for the last 30 years, and today it is my pleasure to be your host for the Point Quest webinar series. I'm delighted to welcome all of you to today's webinar. But before we dive in, I'd like to introduce two important people that made today's session possible. First, meet Ricardo Piñate, our technical wizard behind the scenes.
Yay.
Yay! Ricardo will be ensuring everything runs smoothly and will follow up with the information about your CEU credits after the session. If you experience any technical difficulties, Ricardo is your go-to guy in the chat. And now I'm thrilled to introduce today's featured speaker, Stephanie Griffin. Stephanie is an academic language therapist in Texas. She works with students in the public school setting as well as in private practice. She is passionate about helping students with dyslexia, as well as educating teachers and families. Stephanie brings her expertise in dyslexia, which perfectly aligns with Point Quest's mission of delivering compassionate, individualized support to students with exceptional needs. So, without further delay, let's welcome Stephanie to share her insights with us. And Stephanie, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me and welcome everyone. I am excited to be here. And I do not claim to be an expert, but like she said, I am passionate about it. I have been a teacher for 35 years, and the last 5 years have been in the field of dyslexia. I teach at a intermediate school, fourth and fifth grade, and I also do quite a bit of the testing. So I'm just going to share with you some things that I have learned and some things that help me in the classroom, and hopefully it will be helpful to you as well. So let me, okay, fix this. Okay, so we'll start with what is dyslexia? Oh, Ricardo, my my slides are not going. I'm pressing my space bar, my slides are not
Click on
going to.
that green button on the top left there.
Hang on just a sec. Green button on the top left.
Yes,
Oh,
of
here we
your.
go. Here we
Okay,
go.
there we go. We're
All
back
right.
on
And
So
track.
this is my
that's our technical wizard. Good job.
yeah, this is my hello slide. I'm just saying hello to everybody. And if you don't mind, just drop in the chat what level you teach. So I'm just curious if I have a lot of secondary teachers or if you are more primary elementary.
We have K through 5. We have OTs, grades 6 through 12. We have second grade, AT specialist supporting K through 12. Reading intervention, speech therapist, pre-K, OT, K-12, TK to 12, K-5. So we have a wide variety
Wide
of professionals
variety.
here.
Okay, well, that's great. I will say that I don't have much or any experience in the secondary level, but if you have anything that you want to add, you can put that in the chat as well. So welcome and thank you. The first thing we're going to do is a quick little pretest. And so all of the statements in the pretest are true false. So I'm going to read a statement and then you can just put in the chat whether you think it is true or false. So the first statement is dyslexia is a visual disorder that causes children to see words and letters backwards. Do you think that is true or false? Okay, so this one is false. And a lot of times, the teachers in my school will say, oh, she's making her B's and D's backwards. I think she has dyslexia. And I don't know, I think that sometimes they do make their letters backwards, but It seems like a lot of people that are not in the dyslexic world think this is the main way that we tell if someone is dyslexic or not. It is not a visual disorder, and the letter writing, the reversals, could be age related. Very young children are still learning their direction in their letters, and children who are dyslexic sometimes do that because the reversals are confusing to them, but it is not a sign or a definition for dyslexia. All right, number two. Here's your next true or false question. Dyslexia is associated with low intelligence. Okay, this one is also false. In fact, to have a diagnosis of dyslexia, a student will need to, in the handbook, well, where I live in Texas, in the Texas handbook, it's defined as unexpectedness. Okay, there is an unexpectedness in their abilities, and so most of them do have higher IQs. They just have a trouble with the phonological processing and mapping sounds with letters to read and spell. Number three, dyslexia is the result of being lazy. If children with dyslexia would just try harder, they would learn to read. They would just try a little bit harder. Was that true or false? Okay, this one is also false. In fact, these dyslexic children are a lot of times putting out more effort than some of the other students. They just need to be taught in a way that is explicit and in the way that they need to learn. Number four, dyslexia can be cured with special approaches such as wearing colored lens and using different fonts. Is this true or false? And this one is also false. And it goes along with what I said on number three. These things have been tried, but they have not been proven to help them read better. What these children need is explicit instruction in phonics. Number five, dyslexia can be outgrown. So this one is also false. Uh, Students with dyslexia can definitely become good readers and good spellers, but they will always have dyslexia because it is a brain difference in children who have dyslexia. Um, Number six, content area teachers don't really have time to teach vocabulary and comprehension. So, whenever you're a content teacher and you're not necessarily a reading teacher, all of the vocabulary that you teach is going to help all students with reading, but especially your dyslexic students. Number eight, scaffolding instruction and accommodating students takes a lot of time and a lot of resources. True or false? And it is false because there's a wide variety of accommodations that don't take much time at all. And we'll talk about accommodations a little bit longer. And the last one is about accommodations. And here's your last true or false. Accommodations are unfair because they allow students to get away with easier work. True or false? And I think we all know that that is false. Students with dyslexia need these accommodations to empower them to be on the same playing field as the other students. So all of the answers to your test were false. They were all myths. They were all, we busted all of the myths. All right, so we talked a little bit about the definition of dyslexia, and it is a disorder of constitutional origin, which just means that it's part of their constitution, their makeup, manifested by a difficulty in learning to read, write, or spell, despite conventional instruction, adequate intelligence, and sociocultural opportunities. So the main characteristics are difficulty and reading, spelling, and also fluency. This is the International Dyslexia Association's definition, or IDA, which is a organization that people in the field get a lot of information from, and we go to conferences uh, put on by the IDA. So they define it as a specific learning disability that is neurobiological, which was the word I was trying to think of earlier, trying to say that it has to do with your brain. It's characterized by difficulties with accurate or fluent word recognition and poor spelling and decoding abilities. So you know that if you're having trouble decoding, you're going to have a lot of trouble reading fluently. These difficulties typically result from a deficit in the phonological component of language, which is mapping those sounds to the letters, and it's often unexpected. That's the word I was telling you about a minute ago, in relation to your other cognitive abilities and the provision of effective classroom instruction. Secondary consequences may include problems with comprehension and reduced reading experience that can impede the growth of vocabulary background and knowledge. So we have primary and secondary characteristics of dyslexia. So some of the primary, which would be the main characteristics, would be difficulty reading words in isolation, difficulty accurately decoding unfamiliar words. And these unfamiliar words could be words that they don't know, but could also be pseudo words. And in the testing, we show them a lot of pseudo words to test their knowledge of letter sounds. They have difficulty with oral reading. They're slow, it's inaccurate, it's labored. They're not using the punctuation or pausing at the commas. They're not really grouping the words into meaningful units, not adjusting your stress and your pitch, which would reflect comprehension. The more that you're phrasing, you hear a child that reads well, that's phrasing it well and using these commas and such, that's going to help them to comprehend better. And students with dyslexia really have a hard time with that. And also difficulty in spelling would be a primary characteristic. Some of the secondary characteristics would be reading comprehension and written expression, and also a limited vocabulary. All right. And so the Matthew effect, which you may have heard of before, there is a researcher, Keith Stanovich, and he coined this phrase, the Matthew effect. And I have the whole article, and it's really long and it's very, intellectual. But the gist of it is, for the Matthew effect, it's based on a Bible story, a parable, and it's according to the Gospel of Matthew, and it says, "For everyone that has will be given, and those who have not, it will be taken away." And the way that it relates to reading is, the way that he relates it to reading is, the more you read, the more your vocabulary will grow, the more you'll want to read, and then your vocabulary will continue to grow. And the opposite, if you don't like to read and you don't want to read, you're not going to read outside of school. It could reduce your vocabulary, because a lot of times that's where we're learning our vocabulary, is reading in context. These are some things that dyslexia is not, and we talked about this on our little pre-test: a result of poor teaching or lack of effort. It's not a visual disorder. It once was thought that it was, but it is not. And it's not a broad term referring to any and all difficulties in reading. It's a specialized uh, thing that some children have, and it's definitely not a low sign of intelligence. So these are some common characteristics of dyslexia divided into the different grade levels. And I just got this off of TEA, which is Texas Education Agency if you're in Texas. And then on the next slides, I'm going to break it down a little into each level. So for preschool, some of the common risk factors in preschool could be difficulty with rhyming, poor auditory memory for nursery rhymes and chants, difficulty adding new vocabulary words, inability to recall the right word, like their word retrieval. They're trying to remember these words. Sometimes on the test, they'll just be a row of objects, and they're objects that they know: jacket, coat, shoes, ball, whatever it is. And they know these, but they have difficulty. They'll say jacket, ball, they're trying to retrieve that and for it to come out. And sometimes they have difficulty recalling that. And aversion to print, they don't really enjoy following along as a book is read out loud. Aloud, sorry. For first grade, some of the common risk factors might include difficulty breaking words into smaller parts or syllables, because we know that these bigger words, they need to break them down into syllables to read them correctly. Also, difficulty identifying and manipulating the sounds and syllables. So I actually was working with a child in first grade with this today, and just even small words as in am and breaking it down. What is the first sound? Ah. What is the second sound? And they have difficulty with that. Second and third grade, difficulty recognizing common sight words. And I do see this a lot. These common sight words, we also call them in the curriculum that I teach, we call them irregular words because they don't necessarily follow the rules. Because if you were to follow the rule on this word, went ahead. But if you were to follow the rule on the word to, that's an open syllable. It would say toe. So those are words that they pretty much just have to memorize because that's why they call them sight words. They just need to know them on sight because they can't really sound them out. For fourth through sixth grade, acquisition of less vocabulary due to reduced independent reading, which we talked about, that's like the Matthew effect. Use of less complicated words in writing that are easier to spell than more appropriate words. So even though they may have these bigger words in their head, they may use these smaller words because of the spelling barrier. So the next thing I was going to talk about is comorbidity, which is just a word that means that when you have dyslexia, sometimes you also have another diagnosis. Nancy Mather, who is kind of like a guru in education for dyslexia, she's written the new test called Test of Dyslexia, TOD, the TOD. She says that roughly 40% of students with dyslexia have one or more, at least one more diagnosis, such as ADHD, dysgraphia, or dyscalculia. And of course, with ADHD, it could affect their working memory. Dysgraphia affects their handwriting, and dyscalculia is trouble with numbers, trouble memorizing their facts. It's more associated with math. Some of the secondary diagnoses, which are sad to me, and this is one reason why we really want to catch and test, identify, and start good explicit instruction early, because we don't want to see kids with anxiety, anger, depression, low self-esteem, lack of motivation. They need to know that they're smart and capable because they definitely are, and the label does not define them. When people have more than one condition at the same time, the effects of each condition tend to be more severe. So if they have another one in this list or in another list, it could cause the dyslexia to be more severe, because dyslexia is like on a continuum. You could have a more severe case or a less severe case. So, when you're getting ready to refer, sometimes teachers wonder, is it ADHD or a learning disability? Basically, is it ADHD or is it dyslexia? So, and I'm not an expert definitely on ADHD, but some of the things that I have learned in some of the conferences that I've been to is just that with ADHD, they can pull it out, sometimes on a test. So, like, it may be inconsistent day to day, but on test day, oh, yeah, I know it. I'm going to pull it out. But for our learning disability children, they're going to be consistently weak in whatever they're weak in. And for dyslexia, that would be reading and spelling. So they're going to be consistently weak. Um, Also, with the learning disability, we talked about in the test, they put out a lot of effort, but poor results. We talked a little bit about dysgraphia, and dysgraphia involves the difficulty with the physical act of writing and the organization and expression of ideas and thoughts in written form. So it usually does occur with dyslexia, but not always. You can have, and I have had students that have dysgraphia only. And so this is just a little lesson plan that I use when dealing with dysgraphia. And so we will do handwriting activities, the handwriting for the curriculum that I teach is MTA. It's multi-sensory teaching approach, and it is based in alphabetic phonics, and it's based on a lot of research. And so the research says that actually cursive is more helpful for students with dysgraphia because of the flowing motion. Also, those reversals we talked about. It's hard to have reversals. You're not going to normally get your B and your D mixed up in handwriting in a cursive. So we teach cursive in the curriculum that my school uses. I also add spelling in for the dysgraphia lesson plan and written expression, depending on what grade they're in. We could be writing paragraphs, or if they're very young, we could just be writing sentences. This is the special education referral timeline. And like I say, I'm in Texas, so all of my information is based on Texas. I would assume that it's pretty similar in other states. I would just assume. First, you have a referral, either from a teacher or a parent. Then you get the parent permission. Then you get an FIIE from the diagnostician, and that's all the testing. This is basically all the testing that's done. When the testing is done, we have what's called an ARD meeting in Texas, admission, review, and dismissal. So in this ARD meeting, this is when we make the decisions. Okay, this student is going to come to the MTA class 5 days a week, 45 minutes a day, and these are the accommodations that he or she will have. And that is our referral process in Texas. And some of the things that are good to have when you get ready to refer. So, like I say, that's fine if a teacher wants to come up to me and say, hey, he's making his B's and D's backwards. I think he needs to be tested. That's fine if they want to tell me that. But then I will tell them, well, I still need to have some of these type of things. Like, do they know any of the family history? Because dyslexia is hereditary. So we also have a parent survey, and the parents are usually really honest, and they'll tell us, yes, I had it as a child, or maybe my husband had it as a child. Our school does a hearing and vision screening. We do medical history. The teacher information is really invaluable because that teacher is with that student more than me or the person testing or anyone besides the parent. I always like to have some writing samples so that I can see the handwriting and also their thought process. Attendance is definitely something you want to look at because you're going to look at someone very differently if they've had 2 absences this year as opposed to 20 absences this year, and also the previous interventions. So in Texas, all the testing now goes through a SPED evaluation. Um, these are the things that my teachers give me: spelling test, unedited writing samples, any documentation they can give me is helpful. And uh, this sentence right here, that we use formal and informal data. We look at, like I said, we look at writing samples, we look at attention, we look at how they behave in the classroom, are they on task, those type of things. So we look at the formal data, but we also look at those type of things. And we talked about family history. I do look at the report card. It's not super important, but I do like look at it. And unfortunately, it would be so much easier for all of us if there was a cut score. Yes, no, but there isn't. It's a preponderance of data. Some of the assessments included, I talked to you a little bit earlier about the real word, the nonsense word. We definitely test rate and accuracy, spelling, rapid naming, comprehension, and some of the tests that we use in Texas are the CTOP, the Wormit, the GORT, and the test of written spelling. Those are the tests that I personally give. And that's why I put a little disclaimer. Those are the ones I give, but the diagnostician gives her own test because I am not trained or qualified to give a full individual assessment. As far as accommodations, we talked about accommodations that you would have at the parent meeting, not one size fits all. And I have heard that in some schools. Our dyslexic kids get this. These are the ones that all of our dyslexic kids get. And since dyslexia occurs on a continuum, you wouldn't want to use one size fits all. So some that might be helpful, they should not be asked to read aloud unless they volunteer, a copy of the notes, especially in secondary, additional time on class assignments or shortened assignments, which I prefer shortened assignments because honestly, do we have extra time in the day? They're already coming to me 45 minutes of their day, so they really don't have any extra time. So shortened assignments are good for my grade level. Alternate test location that provides quiet and reduced distraction, which is always good for them. Priority seating, oral reading of directions or written material, which we have that online for their test. A word bank, text to speech, speech to test, spelling assistance. Omit copying when possible because it is laborious for them, and also it is hard for them sometimes to track what's on the board to what's on their paper. And limit or omit time test in math. So another thing that's good for your older kids, I would say fifth grade and above, is to teach them advocacy because as they get older, you're going to want them to be an advocate for themselves. Basically, you want them to know what their accommodations are and how to use them, because just because you put it in the accommodations, if you don't teach them how to use spell check or how to use text to speech, those type of things, they're not going to be able to use them. And also just speaking up for yourself instead of someone else always having to talk for you, because sometimes as you get older, and especially in secondary, you may have, 7 classes and your teacher has 100 and whatever students, and it's not that they are not wanting to help you. You might fall through the cracks. So you need to be the one to be an advocate for yourself. Um, and also teaching advocacy to the parent, because the more educated the parent is, the better advocate they can be for their child. Um, I know that when they come into these meetings, there's the principal and the vice principal and me and the classroom teacher and the diagnostician, and it can be very overwhelming. And so we want to make sure that the parent understands what's going on, and communication is key, of course. So, cursive is what we teach in the MTA program, and a little history of handwriting is that when schools started, back in whenever they started, cursive was taught. And print was only introduced because of the printing press. Because once the printing press came around, you're not, usually you don't read a book in cursive, right? So there was little history of handwriting problems prior to the 1940s. And today, 40 out of 100 people have some degree of handwriting difficulty. And so it's interesting that when we wrote cursive, we didn't have as much trouble. Now, if you look at some of those really old cursive, it's not even doesn't look like today's cursive. It's very hard to read. And I was talking to you about earlier about the continuous line emphasizes left to right directionality. Cursive letter shapes are not really reversible. Following rhythmical movements are more easily executed than those short, straight lines and curved arcs. And every cursive letter can be started on a baseline. You swing up and it's on a baseline. And that's basically what I just said, is that last bullet. Okay. So that's handwriting. For spelling, it includes the knowledge of the alphabet, which you would be surprised at how many children do not know the alphabet without singing it. So whenever I test, I always ask them, can you tell me the alphabet without singing it? And also the sounds for each alphabet letter. Spelling involves, of course, breaking words down into syllables. We talk about word meaning and history of words. And it is not a visual memorization task, which when I taught third grade, that's exactly what I thought it was. Here is your list, memorize it, and we'll have a test on Friday. And now that I've had this training, I understand that we need to teach the spelling rules. So spell check makes learning to spell unnecessary, right? I mean, they have spell check, so why should they need to learn to spell? And I had another piece of research here that talks about spell check. And basically, it's saying that it becomes accessible when children can spell isolated words on a fifth grade range. Okay, this was from Jane Ashby, PhD. So, very few of my children are reading on a fifth grade level. And so, for them to be able to use spell check, they would have to know at least what it starts with and what the patterns are. And sometimes when they do the pull down menu, they're not even sure which word is the word they were looking for because there are homophones. And sometimes they're spelling something correctly, but they were using it incorrectly. For example, then for them. And anything that's not spelled phonetically would be very hard on spell check. So it's not a substitute for proper spelling instruction. Um, Spelling test, the way that we have found that really helps the students, we grade them on a rubric. So the rubric is spelled out for the teachers, and it shows how many points you would get for each word. Like if you have just a string of letters that don't in any way relate to the word, well, then that would be completely wrong. But if you've got just missing the silent E, or maybe you're missing just an R, whatever it is in your word, it's graded on a rubric, so they get partial credit. And this oh, sorry. So this rubric has helped my students' self-confidence, it has helped their grades, and it has actually helped their spelling as well, because I can look at it and show it to them and say, now you would have got this right had you put one more thing. What did you need here? Like if it was the silent E, why is this A long? Oh, I needed a silent E. So it's been very helpful for my students. Some of the resources that I have to offer, I have several books that I use with my students. Whoops. Okay. Well, I'll just go ahead and show you these books. So some of the books that I have are The Alphabet War. This is a story about dyslexia. I also have this one called Magnificent Meg. It's a read aloud book to encourage children with dyslexia. And Ricardo's got these links for you guys. This one is one that my elementary school kids really like. It's called Dyslexia. And I had a little girl read this. And when she finished reading it, she looked at me and said, This is me. And she really related with this. I'm going to see if I can go back to that other slide because here it is. Okay. All right. Brilliant Bee. This is another one that I have. Brilliant Bee. It's about a little girl with dyslexia. And then I also have some for parents and teachers. So this one is Unlocking Dyslexia, Effective Decoding and Spelling Instruction. And then this one is kind of like the Dyslexia Bible, Overcoming Dyslexia by Sally Shaywitz. This is, you can see mine is all marked up and dog-eared. This is a very good book for teachers, but also parents. So I have purchased some, actually had a grant where I purchased all these books, and I purchased this one in particular, several copies for my parents to check out because when we have these meetings, they'll sometimes say, what is it that I could maybe do to help my student at home? And of course, reading to them and letting them listen to good audiobooks, but also I like to have resources for them. So that's this first bullet. These are just some of the books that I got with a grant that I applied for. Also, I don't know if you are familiar with Learning Ally. Learning Ally is a free audiobook platform, and it's free to children with any type of reading problem. It could be dyslexia, it could be other things. There's some very good podcasts out there. The Dyslexia Duo is a very good podcast, and they interview a lot of experts in the field. And this one is the Don't Call on Me podcast. And this lady interviews people, adults who used to have dyslexia and how they have overcome. The textbooks I showed you, and then, of course, the Texas Dyslexia Handbook or whatever state that you are in. And teaching students with dyslexia, automaticity is the bottom line. So we want that automaticity in their reading. We want them to look at these words and recognize them so that they can read fluently to aid their comprehension. So one thing that I have and is a sample dyslexia simulation. And Ricardo, do they have this with them or?
This would have been emailed to everyone. If
Okay.
you look over your emails, these were sent
Okay.
over to
Okay.
everybody.
So it looks something like this. It just looks like a bunch of gobbledygook, okay? And so this is something that I also got at one of the conventions that I went to. So I'm not saying, and the person is probably not saying that this is exactly what it's like, but it's a simulation of what it might feel like to have dyslexia. So the first line looks like it has MOUD. Does anybody have an idea what that word might be? You could just drop it in the chat. So they said that it might be would. So would a text-only site be ideal for someone with a reading disorder? If you have the handout, I'll read you what it's supposed to say. Hardly. Images are not bad for accessibility. They actually increase comprehension and understanding for the worst audiences. What many people do not know, though, is that there is much more at the accessibility for an image that is just its text. Some people roughly assume that images are bad for accessibility, but it essentially replaces the image with text-only version of that image. So if you look at this, the one that was sent to you, and then you see what it's really supposed to say, you can see that it would be very hard to comprehend that if you were reading that. And then the other one is comprehending with poor decoding skills. So on this one, they have left out, they just put a blank where some of these harder words that the students might not be able to sound out, might not be phonetically able to sound out, so they just skip it. So this one is noise in the form of blast from sonar or can travel more than a, and then there's a period. These loud noises are more blank to blank than thought. Research suggests that blank can kill blank that are too close. In addition, some blasts have been blank to cause lung and sinus blank, or maybe even death of, and then there's a period. Perhaps the most of noise is of the marine sonar, this blank blank, the blank. So if you read that and you could only get the words that I read, were you able to identify the main idea? No, I don't think so. Me either. And would you be able to write a summary? I mean, if you can't identify the main idea, I'm sure you can't write a summary. So all of the words in the blanks were multisyllabic words, which carried the meaning for the text. And those are the type of words that a student with dyslexia might struggle to decode. So these are just some things that I wanted to show you, just to show the frustration level. And one more thing, I see it sitting over here and I forgot to show it, but okay. So Ricardo, I can't really see myself. Are you guys able to see this, Ricardo, this handwriting?
If you unblur yourself, we would be able to
Oh,
see a little
okay.
better.
Then I'm gonna need to go back. I don't know. Yeah, I can't get my screen to show myself. Um, this is a little boy's handwriting that I have in my classroom, and let me see if I can. All right. No, I did not mean to do that slideshow. Okay. Yeah, well, I apologize. But anyway, if you could see this, the handwriting is just awful. And I'm not sure why I cannot uh, get myself back on Zoom, Ricardo.
If you open up your Zoom at the bottom, you might be able to pull yourself back up there.
Yes, but then you can't really see my uh,
If you go to your video and then click on the little arrow right
I'll
to the
show
right of
this
the,
first and then I'll go
yeah,
back
that
to my
works.
slideshow. So you can see that his handwriting looks like this. This is his print, okay? And so there's so many problems with this. And then when he does cursive, look at the difference. It's just beautiful. I think his cursive is so, so pretty. And I see a lot of examples like that. Yeah. So let me get back on the, no. Okay, so to get back to the, here we go. So do y'all see this, Ricardo?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So we did the two activities. The only other thing that I was going to say that on the ARD paperwork, some of the things that I take to the meeting when I meet with the parents, I take that Learning Ally information for the parents so that they can use that at home. I always take some type of whatever you have at your school. We call it Remind. It's what we use, that's the parents can text me and I can send out announcements on it. Some people use Class Dojo, whatever it is at your school. So some ways for the parent to communicate with you. I always give them a little, it's like a little brochure about dyslexia because not everybody wants one of these big, thick books to read, but just a small little brochure about dyslexia because yes, I talk about it all day long, every day, and maybe some of you teach it as well, but it's pretty new to the parents and they might not know as much as you think they know. And then I also give them a like a meet the teacher type paper so that they're coming to me. I'm a new teacher to their child and I want them to know me. And then I also give them a little letter that includes everything about the spelling rubric that I use. So yeah, that's basically what I give the parents. And that is my presentation. And if there's any questions or anything, I'll be glad to answer them or try.